Okay, so here we are with Wilderness War. Can't really see the box there, but, well, I had to hold it upside down. This is something I've wanted to own for quite some time. I got to play it about a year ago, a little bit longer at a local gaming group. There's a guy who had a copy of it. Neither of us had played it. Obviously I hadn't. He hadn't even looked at the rules. So we broke it out and tried to learn it, and well, it was very interesting. It definitely caught me as, yeah, this is a game I wanted to play. Now, he had the impression that it would be a lot more like Washington's War than it is. It's not. This is definitely making a serious attempt at simulation. And it is a CDG. I've got the deck of cards here. You see, I have things kind of set up a little differently than usual. I'm trying to keep it down to one table. The map pretty much fits on one table. There isn't a lot more room. I can have the hands of cards on here, but all my extraneous stuff I'm going to have to keep to the sides. We'll see how that works out. If it doesn't work too well, I'll swing to two tables. So anyway, I had a really good time, and the game really intrigued me, but someone gave me the advice. I was playing the French. Oh, you want to go down here and do all kind of raiding. Well, that's kind of what I was thinking, but being kind of intransigent, I immediately went and did other things and ended up kind of fighting a mainline battle down the Hudson River, which is absolutely the worst thing. We also screwed up a number of rules. You know, cases where, he was destroyed if he retreated there, and some of those went badly against me, very badly, to the point where I ended up conceding, and we played some Combat Commander instead, which was also a very good game, and I hope to get a hold of it at some point. Okay, so let's take a look at what you get here. First of all, the map is absolutely beautiful. This is the hard map. The copy that I have comes with the original map. I'll pull it out at some point. It's in the living room right now. But someone also bought this hard map, and much to my happiness, they also had the second edition rule book. Just a worry that, you know, maybe there were errors in the first edition one, which the game was. That would be a problem. We have a lot of different types of counters here. First of all, we have the little stand-up leaders. This game, unlike many others, doesn't come with the option to not use these. I mean, you could pull them out of the stand and lay them down. Each of the leaders has his own little leader box with information on it that's contained on the counter. That's kind of nice. I'm not sure I'm going to use them, but I know that the game gets crowded if you don't. This is a difficult game to play without those, so I may end up having to use the leader boxes. You have your victory point track running in both directions, and it has starting victory points for the different scenarios. Turn record track. Now, years are divided into an early and late season, and you also have a marker to indicate who's going to be going first in a particular season. I don't really remember the rule on that. We'll hit that when we touch them. This is to track how much the provincial assemblies are in favor of the British military actions, essentially. And it gives some restrictions here, so maximum 4 southern and 10 northern provincial units on the map. It's possible to trigger an event where you have to count all the British provincial units, and if you've got too many, some of them get removed. The French have that ability. With the colonial militia, which oddly don't seem to be in place up there. I'm going to have to look in the setup, because I think there are some at the beginning of the game anyway. I'm not sure. Sequence of play is here. Different kinds of boxes. Well, this kind of white terrain is cultivated, and that's important because you can raid it and drilled troops work better in it. There's more open space. The green stuff is wilderness. That's going to provide more difficult movement for the regular troops, which are these square guys. But there's irregulars, which are the round guys, who kind of love that terrain. And then there's mountains, which are less desirable to both. Got a set of charts and tables. Give the different movement effects of the different spaces. Victory point table. Bunch of summaries for the two different types of units, the regulars and the irregulars, and what can be held in different kind of fortifications. Your combat table. You're going to be doing some raiding. Sieges are available, and then who can retreat where. This, like many CDGs, and I think it's more the fault of the point-to-point movement than a lot of things. A lot of people say, it's the cards. No, it really isn't. It's filled with lots of special cases, and that's going to always be a problem for me. I read through the rules before. I read through them again. I played it. Then I read through the rules, I don't know, maybe a month or two ago. But then I read through them again yesterday. And now, in part, I'm going to go through them again with you guys. Not just because I don't know if anybody else has done it, but because I need the refresher. Even after just reading them last night, I'm not really up on it. And this always helps me. Okay, so our playing pieces have a number of values on them. They're not too complex here. We've got a combat strength and a movement allowance, and you've got the same here for the irregulars. The irregular Indians are kind of color-coded. So these guys are always pro-British if they're on the board with that red stripe. But if we look at some of these others, you see some with a gray stripe who can be either side, and there'll be equivalents over here to match those counters in the pro-French ones. Only one person can have any given tribe, nation, whatever. I'm not sure what the terminologies are. Not so much in the game, but for the Indian nations, and I think it differs by region. Under their control. So if you have Mohawk, well, Mohawks aren't a good choice. If you have the Cayuga on your side, well, the other people cannot have them. And their kind of allegiances are marked with these little counters. So these tribes are pro-French right now, whereas looking for a pro-English one, there's got to be one kicking around here somewhere. There we go. And those are the Mohawks. Okay. And then we have some that are neutral. These are Iroquois tribes, which either side can gain control of. For the leaders themselves, they have 3 numbers on them. They have the initiative number over on the left. That is how much it costs to activate the unit, a command of that guy. The next number is the command rating. That's the tiny number up here, and that's how many units they can stack with them. And then the final number in the square box is a battle rating, which affects the actual military capabilities. Sequence of play is listed here. You deal out a hand of cards to each player, like in most CGGs. And speaking of which, the cards for this I had to pull them out of. Somebody was using condoms. They're actually pretty good quality in my view. They shuffle nicely, yet have a decent amount of sturdiness to them. I'm assuming these are first edition cards. I'd be worried maybe the second edition was a harder shuffle. I don't know. I know that GMT sometimes puts out in their more designer editions cards that are just too stiff for my taste. It's hard. You can't even break them so that they work. there's this danger that they're going to just crack or something. I don't know. Okay. Ooh, that's nice. Then you take the action phases, which is when you actually play the cards and take your activities. Oh yeah, like with King Charles, I don't have a lot of time here. Unfortunately, I'm going to probably use it up. And you take your specific actions, and that's going to be the same in either season. It's just designed that way. And here are the different things you can basically do. But then after that, some effects take place, like the Indians all go to their homes. They return. You have to start them over again. You remove any raided markers, these little raid markers here. A lot of the game, especially for the French, is collecting victory points from those. Now, the victory level is actually really low. You only need 10 victory points. Well, you need above 10 victory points to get an automatic victory. We'll go into the victory in a little bit, but a half point is actually a pretty significant little amount, and if you can get a few raids off early in the game, especially in this early scenario, it's possible. In the later scenario, there's going to be a lot of forts and stockades built around the edge of the English territory, which is going to make things a little harder. Of course, there are conditions in play to make the English not automatically lose, I hope. Alright. What else do we have? We have these stockades. And we have fortifications. We also have on the board permanent fortifications. Those can only be captured. You can never destroy them. You can also capture enemy forts, though. Stockades you burn down when you capture them. Okay, let's see what we got. Okay, so what can you do with your strategy card? They actually don't list everything out here. You basically have a couple of choices. You can activate. Now, if you do an activation, you play a card, and it's, I guess I'll show one of these. It's like you're used to. It's going to be a single deck here. You can play a card for the command points or the ops points, or you can play it for the event. If you play it for the ops points to activate, you can activate a force with an initiative rating that's equal to or less than the number of the card. You can also use it to activate individual units, though, but they're going to be moving individually. And there's a restriction on that. If you're moving drilled troops, the square counters, I guess, you can only move a single one of them, no matter what your activation card. But if you use an activation card and move your irregulars, the round guys, and leaders, you can move one piece per point on the card. Okay. When you define a force, it looks to me like you can grab a leader and anything that you can subordinate to him, along with enough units that they each can control. So you can pretty much kind of gather all your leaders in one place and go marching around that way. It may not be the most effective thing to do, but unlike some games, this one doesn't seem to have a real force size limitation. It's just, well, if you move all your leaders to one place, you have no ability to react anywhere else, and that could be very, very bad. You can also play a card to build stockades or forts, but not both. Now, when you build stockades, essentially you need to have troops in the location, and then with the advanced rules they have to be supplied, or it has to be a cultivated space that was originally yours. And I don't know, I think this means southern, this color marker here. I'm not sure. Okay. Maybe the militia zones, no? I don't know. I don't see a northern militia zone. That's my problem. Alright. where am I? Okay, so when you play a card, you can build that many stockades on the board, and that's very useful for the British to sort of build this line to keep the French out of the south. That's one of the probably big things they're going to want to do as soon as possible. Now, with forts, it's the same way. It's points, but you have little fort construction markers somewhere. Okay, maybe you don't. They're on the back of the fort. And those are the first thing placed, and they give you no bonus whatsoever. And then the second turn that you pay activation points to build forts, you can flip when you build forts, you can combine putting new construction markers down, as well as flipping over old ones and getting fully built forts. You can build a fort on top of a stockade. The stockade will disappear when the fort's completed, but that gives you some defensive bonus while you're building the fortress or fort. It's not a fortress. The fortresses are the 2-pointers. You can destroy your own forts. Some cards will bring Indians into play as allies or restoring units. Some will bring your reinforcements and reemplacements into play. The British colonial politics allows you to move this marker about. When the French do it, it triggers a check to make sure that there are not too many provincial units on the board. There's going to be some events that can be used as responses basically at any time. Now at the start of this game you have like an 8-card hand for each turn. So the actual turns are going to be fairly large in terms of the amount of card plays, which kind of makes sense. We don't have all that many turns here. What are we looking, 7 years, 8 years actually? 8 years for the 7 Years' War. We actually start before the hostilities break out in Europe. And 2 seasons each, so that's a fair-sized game, and they say about 5 hours. Okay, your land movement is not exactly the same as most of these games. So in most of these point-to-point type movement games, you know, you're dictated just moving space to space. There may be terrain involved, but quite often it's not too important. Well, here the terrain and the unit type combine. So in particular, drilled units that pass through a wilderness space, and this is really weird, they can move through one, but then they must stop on their next space, whether it's wilderness or not. You'll also see there's some effects and differences in the advanced rules, supply and well, there's restrictions to who can move where. So the irregulars have trouble moving through cultivated terrain, actually, because they're afraid of that. Okay. But there's also boat movement, where you can move down these water lines, these river connections coming through here. And what's the little white dots? Lakeshore connection. Those, I think, count as river connections. When you choose to do boat movement, now when you do land movement you can walk along the water, there's no big deal there, but when you do boat movement, instead of whatever your normal movement allowance is, which can be fairly low for the drilled units, you see these guys have, maybe you don't see, I can't see with the lighting, you see these guys have a 4 movement allowance. That's fairly low. Well, on the river movement you have 9 movement points. And you're allowed to cross a single land connection as well. That kind of covers portages and the like. So you could sail down here and then to Hudson Carry north to Hudson Carry south, basically connecting up to the river, and then make your way down. So that's another option that takes place. You can also kind of strike out from the river in order to engage. The English also have naval movement available, where they can move from port to port. And one particular kind of naval movement they have is the amphibious assault. was used to great effect, for example, at Louisburg. There, you're looking at these special red lines. You have to own Halifax, for example, which I don't think can be taken from them, to get to Louisburg. Then, once you have Louisburg, you can make amphibious assaults into the St. Lawrence. That's, I don't know, kind of cool. Anyway, I'm not doing a great job on this. I'm worried I'm going to be late for work. Okay. Whenever you move an enemy in occupied space, you largely have to stop. There's an exception to that in the advanced rules. Now, this game, unlike most of the CDGs, kind of works things like interceptions and withdrawal from combat into the advanced rules. So we're not going to get them right away. We'll touch them later. But for battle here, you're going to each be rolling a die. Like you would in, I don't know, a lot of other games actually. I'm thinking Empires and Arms is sort of the first big game that really hit me and struck me that way. But there's a lot that have this. You add up the total strength and you roll to see who hits, how many hits you perform on the enemy. There's restrictions on what you can take damage on. In general, you have to damage units before you destroy units, but there is a restriction where drilled units have to take every other loss, and that actually supersedes. You could end up losing drilled units. Losses are pretty much permanent in this game. They go back in the tray. They could come back from some cards, but for the most part, your units that you lose, you probably aren't going to get back. You can replenish step losses, though. I remember that. Alright, so the guy who wins is the guy who does the most damage here. And the other guy's got to retreat. If you roll a 1 or a 6, there's a chance you have to roll for every enemy leader. There's a chance that they might die. They have a 1 in 6 chance. We're using 6-sided dice for this, I hope. You get a victory point if you win the battle, as long as there's a regular or at least 4 units on the enemy side. And if there's no defending fortifications and you eliminate all the enemy without taking any losses yourself, you can keep going. So you can keep moving after an attack, in some cases. Now, the retreat is tricky. There's a set of restrictions here. So the French can never retreat versus naval movement. Okay, that's fine. Naval movement is the port-to-port movement. No big deal there. But it does mean that if they get hit in Louisburg, they lose their whole force. The British are allowed to do so if they have an amphib marker, which means they did an amphibious invasion and it hasn't been. They haven't lost the beachhead yet. You can't retreat into an enemy unit or fortification, no biggie there. But the defender can't retreat from where the attacker entered. That's normal. The attacker must retreat back to the space that they entered. And here's the killer. Drilled troops have to retreat to a cultivated space or friendly fortifications. This means it's really dangerous to bring your drilled troops and just go marching out into the wilderness. If you get defeated and you don't have a stockade at least to fall back on, your force disappears. That's pretty severe, and that was one of the factors that we kind of missed in my first playing. Until it really hurt me. Okay. For fortresses and forts, but not stockades. Now, what is the effect of a stockade, says Enrico, who... We got a list of column shifts and die rolls. What tactics rating is 1. If you don't have auxiliaries and you're in the wilderness or mountains, you take a penalty. If you don't have regulars and cultivated, you take a penalty. Okay, fieldworks give you a bonus, a shift. But you know what? I don't see what stockades do. And this was kind of weird because I kind of felt the same way previously. I'm not sure that they give you... So, those fieldworks come just before a battle. There's a reaction card. You can say, I built fieldworks. And then they just kind of stay there, which is also kind of weird, but... Yeah, I'm not sure. Stockades have this 4 on them. They have a -1, which to me indicates they probably affect a -1. But I don't know what that 4 is for either. Alright, you know what? I'm going to probably go to work and try to pick this up later. Alright, so let's pick up where we were several hours later. I was looking up the stockades. Now, first of all, the 4, I think, is a symbolization of how many units can sit there. If you look at the fort effect table, and forts have that number on them as well up on the corner, well, they have a unit capacity of 4, and I seem to remember somewhere, although stockades are not included in the fort and fortress summary, of course, that stockades allow you to hide a few units in them too. Maybe that's a misprint. Maybe I can look. It may have been 2. It may have been anything. But whatever. Now, on the combat results table, it does specify units in a stockade give you the -1 that's indicated on the counter. So the counters are doing a good job there. What's not doing a good job is the rulebook. And this is actually the 2nd edition of this rulebook, supposedly. And they kind of say, the combat results table summarizes the following die roll modifiers. Cool. And other modifications for leaders, unit types, and certain terrain, stockades, and event cards. So it is kind of covered, but when something starts enumerating a list, as this does, giving several of these values, and then they're not comprehensive, it doesn't work for me, right? If I read something in the rules and it says, go look at the combat results table, that'll give you everything you need. And it doesn't start going through, you know, if only one side is in cultivated terrain, the other side serves, or if only one side has regulars, the other side serves. Now, that's also here. Why do they call that out? I mean, I don't feel like the rulebook makes it any more clear particularly, but anyway, up to GMT's usual standards, I guess. Okay, what else is left in here? Damned if I know. I already kind of went over the retreat rules, I believe. It's kind of hard to remember. What I did not go over was how sieges work. So, this 4 doesn't really make sense because you don't siege stockades. You do siege forts, however. If people go into a fort, then, well, you have to build up to being able to get an assault. And you do that by rolling on the siege table. I'll put over here and try to look for. And that gives you certain pluses. And you have to get to a net plus of 2. Once you get to that, once you get to siege level 2, which is covered on these little counters, they have a 0 and a 2. They don't, I don't know if any of them, yeah, some of them have a 1. So that's cumulative over the turns. And once you hit a 2, you're allowed to do a siege, an assault. And this is how you actually capture the city. You have to make an assault. And in fact, you have to make the choice to do it when you get to 2. Now, any other time that you increase to that, you can do it again. The actual assault is handled it's got its own special modifiers in the assault table. I think that replace the regular battle ones. There will not be militia involved. I haven't really explained militia. Did we hit them in the rules yet? I know that my setup rules, I don't have any on there, so I'm really kind of confused about that. And yes, this is what trying to deal with these GMT rule books does to me. It makes... I mean, I really am this clueless because each game has its own rules. They don't really play off each other very well. And one of the things Here I Stand and Virgin Queen kind of followed up. It was like, wow, one that actually carried most of the rules and really called your attention to what it's not. All the rest, there's generally this feeling of, oh yeah, let's make up a completely new way to handle movement and combat and this and that and the other. So you're learning wargaming all over again. And it's not even like learning it all over again because it's very similar. Now you could say the same about, I've said this all before. It's just very irritating, and then GMT does not do the best job on rules. Maybe SPI could have pulled this off. Maybe the gamers could pull it off. GMT cannot inflict their rules on me effectively. Okay. Here we have militia. So, yeah, militia show up in the cultivated spaces. I think I talked about that. But again, I don't know where they come from. If I can find... somewhere over here. Yeah, let's keep the rules in separate books because there are so many of them. I mean, there really aren't, but we had to, you know, put this detailed playthrough and all this stuff in here and strategy notes and stuff. Okay, so let's see. Do we have any discussion here? I'm not in the 1757 scenario, but I'm going to look there to see, because there's some notes there. Yeah, I'm just not seeing any listing anywhere in here that indicates that there's any militia on the board. Which is interesting, because the quantity in here actually matters. And obviously, later in the war, there should be some militia. I'll clear that up before I play, I guess, but we'll push on through this. Okay. Okay, so there's no militia in an assault. Step losses must come from drilled troops first, even if it involves destroying units. There's no retreat, and there's no victory points in the combat, but if you win the fortress, you get... If the fortress changes hands, that's worth a victory point. In order to win this, you have to cause higher step losses to the defender. Even if you eliminate the entire defender, even if there's no troops left, they'll still be on the board and hold that fortress, which kind of makes sense. And you'll notice there's a combat column of 0, so the fort can still hurt you even if there's no one in it, indicating some residual defensive capacity. All right, what about raiding? So raiding's kind of funny because it requires your auxiliary units, the little round guys. And it requires they not have anybody watching them. In particular, they can't be deployed with regulars. If they're deployed with regulars, they're acting like a regular army. But if they're not, they're off on their own, kind of doing their own thing. And their own thing is very bad for the people around them. Raids can happen against an enemy's cultivated space that they originally owned, one of their stockades, or an Indian settlement that the sorry, that's not one. I don't know, one of these guys. That the Indian, and not this one because that's only off board, that the Indians are actually on the board that are allied with the opposing side. And what happens when you raid? Darn to find out. Alright. So if it happens in an enemy cultivated space, if they have militia, they can drop one in the space and force you to fight a battle. And even if it's in a stockade, you must attack it. If the raiders win, they get to fight normally. Otherwise, they have to retreat. Now, we get all kind of special things like, oh, you can play the blockhouses event. This is another annoying factor of some of these CDG rulebooks. They're bringing specific cards into play. Man, the card should just explain itself, and I shouldn't have to bother with this. I shouldn't have to even know about it. But anyway, all right. And it may be in this one. I really enjoyed playing this game, but we had a hard time with the rules, and now I'm seeing why. It's just a hard... the couple of games that I had faced beforehand made a lot more sense, but as you pick up more and more of these CDGs, they're not helping me. They're not extending the knowledge. It's not like you can pick one up easily because you picked up another. The simple little card mechanism isn't enough to carry over. And lots of bubbles on the map doesn't seem to mean follows the same rules. Okay. So for a raid, whoever the leader is for the raid adds his tactics rating. There's a bonus. Rogers Rangers have a bonus in rating just because they were just so cool. And if it's done in a space with militia, 2 or more militia in it, there's a penalty on rating, and you kind of have that here. Okay. And then you roll on some table, probably. This raid table, which differentiates between cultivated and stockades and settlements. And it's easier in terms of damage to raid a plain cultivated area. Stockades and settlements are more likely to hurt you when you raid. Okay, great. And if you succeed, a number of things happen. You get a rated marker, one of these little guys, which will be worth a half victory point at the end of the turn. And they're color-coded for the different sides. If there's a stockade in the space, it's gone. If there's Indians anywhere on the map who belong to that tribe, they're removed. And then at the end of the turn, like I said, you get that victory point that you get for that marker that you put down. Of course, they have to kind of space that way, but whatever. All right. If you roll a natural 1 or a 6 against stockade or enemy ally, and I hope this is all in here, you know? Yeah, we got little stars here. Okay. There's a chance that a raiding leader is killed. And I'm going to take that this game's philosophy is the rulebook is unimportant and everything's on the card or the board or the counters. And if I don't understand anything, it can't be important. Because the rulebook seems to repeat stuff that's in there regularly, and it's just easier to make it up as I go. All right. So you can't re-raid a space to get victory points with one exception. If somebody builds a stockade there again, you can raid it again. Now the rules aren't well stated that way, but that's what I'm taking away from them. What they're actually stating is if you raided a stockade there before, you can raid the space again. There's no way of marking that. But there is a way of saying, there's a stockade there now, I can raid the space. Because if you successfully raided before, you destroyed the stockade. Likewise with an Indian, if Indians are brought into play from a space where there were Indians that got raided before, if that's possible, that'll, again, be obvious in a sort of sense, although you have to look all over the board to see if those Indians are in play, right? Okay. So after you raid, the raiders have to go home. If they're Indians, they go back to their home settlement space. If they're Cherokee, they die. What? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. Looks like Cherokees just die if they raid. And they can be accompanied by leaders or coureurs de bois. If they're not Indians, however, they go to the closest friendly unbesieged fortification. Okay. So, attrition. Apparently there's a winter attrition phase. Comes at the end of the year. And drilled troops only suffer if they're besieged or not in a cultivated fort or stockade or fortress. And they take a loss of what looks like half the units are eliminated. Half the reduced units are eliminated. And no, by odd, wait. First eliminate every odd reduced drilled unit and every full strength drilled. Okay, so yeah, half your, I'm assuming that's what they mean by odd. Half your drilled troops that are already wounded are removed, and then all the full strength ones that are left get flipped over. Alright, and victory conditions. So, the Brits have to control all the on-map fortresses as well as Niagara. It's gotta be somewhere. It's gotta be up here. And Ohio Forks. If either side presses past 11 victory points, it's over with a win. And after 1759, the French win if they have at least as many victory points as the box on the victory point track marker with that year. So these are targets for the French. Okay, so if the French in 1762 have at least 1 or at least -5 victory points, they win. That doesn't make a damn bit of sense. All right, great. Well, let's keep looking. So, let's try that again. After 1759, these are years after 1759, yeah. 60, 61, 62, maybe this is something special, huh? 8 in 1760, 5 in 1761. Looks like 1 in 1762. I don't know what that extra number's for. Hey, I wonder if it's on the old map. Alright, let's stop and see. Okay, well, the original map has the same issue. Maybe that's supposed to be a different year. Maybe it's unimportant. Maybe it's just a typo. Maybe it means something else. And we'll never know. Or maybe some card will tell us. Who knows? 1762 is the last year of the game, though, so that's not going to be a typo in terms of years, I hope. We'll see. Okay. Maybe that's the end of the game that one happens, but no, that doesn't make any sense anyway. Okay, and that's in the victory check phase, which comes at the end of the late season only. Special rules for 1759. Great, that's fine. We don't need to do that. Ending in 1762. The French win, yeah. At the end of 1762, if they have a victory point. The British win if they have at least 5. So that's what it's for. It's a draw inside of here. Great. All right. And you know, they wouldn't have had to tell us about these boxes. They could have just given the rule, and those numbers would be, that's useful, you know. All right. Rules for bidding, la la la. Okay, what about the advanced rules? Because we're, of course, going to play with these because it was so much fun to learn the regular rules. Actually, they're not too bad. And, you know, honestly, I don't think the game has a lot of rules. It's only 15 pages, 16 pages, what? But they just don't stick in my head. All right. Infiltration. So now, this is something that I think only auxiliaries, the little round guys, only when they're moving alone or with one unit commanded by a leader, can try to move through an opposing unit. Now, I think the unit that attempts to infiltrate must have the movement allowance to move into the space, I guess. No, to reach a space that's not an enemy fort or fortress. It's subject to interception. It's eliminated if it gets forced back. And it must end its movement or keep moving. If it ends movement in an enemy-occupied space, there's going to be a battle. But it had to have movement points to get through. Okay? Now that's weird, but okay. Must have sufficient movement allowance to reach a space that is not... I don't know why. But I guess it's not really infiltration if you... Well, no, it still is because you're moving into a space you couldn't otherwise get into. Yeah, I don't know. Because normal battle is between spaces, I do believe. Yeah. Moves into a space containing enemy units. No, so... that wouldn't be infiltration. Then you walk into the space with the enemy. Great. All right. So the way this was worded led me to believe that one was adjacent to attack. All right. Interception. If somebody moves next to you, you have an opportunity, like in many games, to intercept. Of course, this isn't part of the basic rules here, but and what's your chance? And this can also be done to units that are infiltrating in your space. So you have an additional chance to stop them, I guess. You roll a die and add the tactics. You have to roll a 4 or higher. There doesn't seem to be a bonus or a penalty for the moving player having a good leader. Who can intercept? You can attempt with one unbesieged force or individual unit. Lone auxiliaries entering wilderness or mountain can only be intercepted by a lone auxiliary unit, with or without leaders. But this doesn't happen in the same space. If you're intercepting in the same space, you're able to intercept with your entire stack. Which makes sense, they're trying to sneak through you. Okay. If you don't intercept against a unit trying to infiltrate, the infiltrated unit may not attempt other interceptions. What? Okay. Against the infiltrating unit. Great. Okay. And there's also a battle avoidance rule here, which again, I think, I'm just assuming it's a 4, but I don't know. Yeah, it's again tactics added to your die roll. You need a 4 or higher, and you just succeed. So there's no real comparison between tactical ratings, and that's your battle tactics. That's the combat affecting thing. They also have scouting rules. Drilled troops who have auxiliaries don't need to stop if they pass through the wilderness. Remember, there was a penalty where if you're moving through the wilderness, you had to stop. If you have drilled troops there, they could only move one space through the wilderness and then they stop no matter what they hit afterwards. Well, here they're allowed to be scouted through by an auxiliary. However, on the other side, auxiliaries moving through cultivated spaces have to stop in the next space unless they have drilled troops with them. So basically, they're not really comfortable wandering around where they could get caught by the local authorities or something. Supply. Drilled troops have to worry about drawing supply. And British can trace to a captured port. The supply line is an unbroken chain of forces, none of which spaces, none of which is occupied by an unbesieged enemy fortification or unit. An enemy fort or fortress under siege doesn't block. Each space has to have one of the following: water connected to an adjacent space in the chain, so you can run along a riverway. Cultivated spaces. You can run through cultivated spaces. There's assumed to be roads there. Friendly fortifications. Now, fortifications include stockades or the amphib marker. The English can trace from the amphib marker back, essentially, to a port. Units in a wilderness or mountain don't have to have a fortification in their space to be in supply, but the next space they go to has to have one of these supply connections. What happens if you don't? Well, you can't build forts or stockades, you can't roll for sieges, and you can't improve your strength up to full. And that's it. Alright. Well, this was painful. Probably all the more so for you guys than for me. I'm fighting through the rules. And all I can suggest is that these intros are not the way to see these games. If you're looking at my intros, you're probably looking at the wrong part of my video. Seeing the game as played for the first couple of plays will probably show you better what's going on than these tedious intros. But I need to fight my way through them, and I'm thinking maybe it's of some value to you. I don't want to redo them just because they're crappy, right? But some people asked for the rules explanations, so I've been throwing them in. Likewise, the review kind of assumes that you've been following along with the game. I see that my hits are always highest on the intros and the reviews. That's fine. If you're finding them useful, that's great. But sometimes the intros, you're going to suffer like this, and sometimes the reviews aren't going to make a damn bit of sense to you because you don't know what I'm talking about. I haven't explained the game or anything. All right, up it goes.